The old Top Gear trio consisted of three men named Jeremy Clarkson, James May, and Richard Hammond. If you're between the ages of 18 and 30 and you had a slight interest in cars, then these three blokes most likely dominated your childhood and your TV screens every night at 8 p.m. on BBC Two. They didn't create automotive television, but they used the base formula and made it into something that anyone could watch and have a laugh, even if you weren't remotely interested in cars. Now, that's the basics. To understand how this pokey British motoring show became watched in 214 countries and loved worldwide, we have to go back. The old Top Gear. Now, when I say the old Top Gear, I'm going to assume you think of Clarkson, Hammond and May. But old Top Gear actually began in April 1977, and it was insanely different to what the beloved trio made it into. Original Top Gear was for the people. It was proper motoring journalism. They tested cars that you might actually buy, and if I'm honest, it was a bit boring. They didn't have a test track, they didn't have the reasonably priced car, nor did they have any fire-spitting V12s. If you watch an episode of original Top Gear, I think you might nod off. So then, in 1977, original Top Gear was broadcasted on BBC One and presented by Angela Rippon and Tom Coyne, two people I'm sure most of you have never heard of. The show did fairly well and saw Jeremy Clarkson join in 1988. However, in 1999, viewing figures had declined and Clarkson had left the show the same year. Eventually, original Top Gear was cancelled in 2001. The beloved trio. In 2002, Top Gear was brought back from the dead and it had a Formula One test track known as Dunsfold Aerodrome to play with, a huge aircraft hangar that had been converted into a studio, and they had a V8 coffee table. The main idea was to keep Top Gear to its original roots and only test cars that people might actually be able to afford to buy. However, this was quickly thrown out the window. They hired the Stig. Damn, boy, he's dead! A masked racing driver that never spoke and never showed his face. All he did was drive round with test tracks very fast.
I'm in my mum's car.
Once Top Gear had broken away from the boring shadow that old Top Gear had casted, they were free. They had things like the news section, which ended up being three middle-aged blokes talking about something that was slightly to do with cars, then trailing off to something that wasn't. But this meant that there was more personality than shows like Fifth Gear, which therefore made Top Gear more popular with people who didn't really have an interest in cars, but just wanted some highly entertaining telly to watch on Sunday nights full of roast dinner with a brandy in hand. They had long road trips in old beaten cars, which again gave off more of an intimate side to the presenters. Clarkson, Hammond and May made a show about cars into a show that didn't end up being about cars at all, which brings us neatly to our next section. The Cancellation. In 2015, Jeremy Clarkson had a confrontation with a producer on the show about poor catering and long filming hours, which ended up in a physical spat. Soon after, in March 2015, the BBC announced that Jeremy Clarkson had been suspended and Top Gear would not continue. Now think back to what I was saying earlier about the show being about the presenters' personalities instead of the cars, because when Clarkson was fired and we knew that there was no more Top Gear, us lovers of the show were sad. Jumping ahead to when the show was revived in 2016 with Chris Evans and all the other lot, I think I speak for all lovers of the Clarkson crew when I say that it just wasn't the same. This shows that we didn't care about the cars, we cared about the personalities, and no matter what the BBC try to do with Top Gear now, it just won't be the same. New Top Gear. The 2016 version of Top Gear got an overwhelming amount of backlash for the first episode when there was a clear jab at the old version of Top Gear. The story goes there were a bunch of employees from Chris Evans' local curry restaurant sitting on a Vauxhall. Chris asked the audience, "Do you know why they're here?" Somebody said, "For catering," which was clearly planned to mock the old Top Gear. That wasn't the main cause of all the backlash though. With Clarkson, Hammond and May, there was real chemistry and they bounced off each other and the crowd flawlessly. The new Top Gear crew consisted of Chris Evans, Matt LeBlanc, Chris Harris, Rory Reid, Sabina Schmidt and Eddie Jordan. The problem was that there was no chemistry and every slight joke came across so forced and unbelievably scripted. Granted, the old Top Gear was scripted as well, but they were able to put real life emotions into what they were saying. This new crew weren't able to do that. The end of Top Gear. The last lineup of Top Gear presenters consisted of Freddie Flintoff, Paddy McGuinness and Chris Harris. It has to be said that their chemistry was better than the last lot.
I mean, it's alright,
But again, nowhere near what Clarkson, Hammond and May had. Recently, Freddie Flintoff had a major accident when filming the new series of Top Gear and hasn't been seen since December 2022. And the BBC has now announced that Top Gear has officially been cancelled. It's a shame that Top Gear had to end this way, and obviously we wish Freddie Flintoff a speedy recovery. But what happened to Clarkson, Hammond and May after Top Gear? Well, when Clarkson was sacked, Richard Hammond and James May left the BBC and all three signed a deal with Amazon to do a motoring show there. Then the Grand Tour was born. The opening scene of the Grand Tour was one of the best bits of television I've ever seen. All three blokes on the Bonneville Salt Flats, 3 fast Mustangs, hothouse flowers singing I Can See Clearly Now, a vast lineup of all kinds of cars to join them as they headed to the new studio, which was the tent. Now I could make a whole other video on the Grand Tour because that didn't really go to plan either, but I'm going to skip ahead. So where's the trio now? Jeremy Clarkson has his own farming show called Clarkson's Farm. Richard Hammond has his own TV show on the Discovery Channel about his workshop called The Smallest Cog, and James May has his own cooking show along with his own travelling show. Unfortunately, the Grand Tour has been officially cancelled by Amazon after a controversial article Clarkson wrote about Meghan Markle. So there's no more Top Gear, there's no more Grand Tour, and there's also no more Clarkson's Farm after the next series. But after 20 years of filming together, and with Jeremy and James pushing over 60 years old, it was only a matter of time before they had to pack it in.